Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and welcome back. Or I feel like we should whisper it this month because you can't do, I feel like everyone's done these silent audio jokes when we're talking about the silent issue. Pretend that I'm whispering this to you, and it's real quiet, and we got to be real quiet as we listen to this. But no, I'm excited. I'm excited this week because in case you didn't see the headline, we are talking about G.I. Joe number 21, but not just G.I. Joe number 21 because we've covered that. In fact, as you'll see in today's interview, I have thoughts about how ad nauseum G.I. Joe number 21 has been covered. But I love it. I do love it. I love the issue, and I love today's interview. I was joined by Josh Eggebeen from the After Action Report crew, and we talk all about his new book, The Unofficial History of G.I. Joe number 21. Now, listeners, if you're new to the show, welcome aboard. If you're returning, thank you, and you have a good chance that you won a contest if you're returning because you've heard the contest details before. This is the Joe on Joe podcast, where I talk about everything related to G.I. Joe. Started with the cartoons, we've gone through Extreme and DIC, and we've done the Marvel comic books. Started up Special Missions last episode. And we've worked through a lot of the ephemera in the comic book world. And recently, I've been digging into this After Action Report stuff, which if you're not familiar with, go to afteractionreport.net, and you'll see all the great books that Roger and Greg and Josh put together for you. And we've been running our contest for the last month. Really, it's over a month, because initially it was going to end in March. And then I sat down with Josh, and Josh walked in, and we're going to be giving away these copies of the After Action Report books. They have a whole series of books of them. So I've got a bunch to give away. So I was ready to give away like 3 of them. And then Josh came over, and we did this great interview that you're about to hear. But when he walked in my house, he gave this huge box and was like, give all of these to your listeners. So I literally have like 18 or 19 books that we're giving away this week. So I was really happy with that. We didn't have to have winners. Literally, that's how many people entered in the contest. Like, it was a weird 1-to-1. So I'm so excited. So I emailed everyone last night, and here's the big winner. So if you're listening and you didn't check your emails, or you just want to have some FOMO, if you're listening, you're like, man, I never sent in for that contest. I could have won. You totally could have won. Thanks to Josh's generosity. All these people will be getting a copy of one of the After Action Report books. Josh had this box, had one of everything. It had their After Action Report Volume 1, Volume 2, which Volume 1 covered the original Larry Hama years at Marvel. Volume 2 covered the Devil's Due years. Volume 3 is in there. That covers the IDW years, or it's 3. I think, yeah, it's the Hama IDW years. And then there's copies of the Unofficial History of G.I. Joe number 21, which we're talking about in detail today. And then there's copies of their kind of newish book, actually, the newest book, rather, the Command Files, which is a book that groups all of the Joes into kind of like, what if they were rebuilding them today as teams? So it's kind of like it's like a mix between an official handbook and a team builder, like RPG kind of style book. It's really a unique item. I talked about it a couple episodes back on this show, give it a nice healthy review, so you can go back and see what that's all about. But all these people have won one of those books. So we're getting them in the mail this week. We're talking, here's the winners in no particular order: Bradley Glynn, Michael Little, Yorktown Joe, Todd Smith, Scotty Cameron, Jason Snow, Nick Hutchcraft, Shane Thaxton, Ricardo Mejias, Theron Mitchell, represent Theron, Doug Kohler, 2 Fat Guys in the Morning. I'm assuming that's a show and not just a bad decision your mom made. Frank Colosimo, my Italians are rolling in their grave, and Kurt Schluter, and Agent Chuckles. Some you recognize some of those names as friends of the show. They've been guests. Some are new friends to me. You're all listeners, and oh my God, I appreciate each and every one of you that entered and that listen, and then just listen to the show and give your, let me think, give your ears my time of day. How does that work? Give me a half hour of your week, hour, whatever. Sometimes it rolls over to blather. And that you've been interested enough to stick around with me this long. That means so much to me. So you guys are all getting some version, one of these AR reports. Check your email. I've gotten most of you back. There's a few of you I'm waiting to hear from, and so excited. So there's the big winners. It's not like one of those contests that we talked about when Michael Nye and I did the Action Force books, where they're like, we're doing a contest, and then the book got canceled and you never heard who won the contest. No, those are the winners. These are the big winners. And what's great is everyone won because of Josh's generosity. So, yeah, if you're not following me on social media, please go to at Joe on Joe Pod. That's at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's pretty easy to find. You could send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. You never know when we'll be doing more contests and stuff. I'm sure something else will pop up. Sometimes I just like to get rid of things around my house. So you never know. So we'll see what comes up next. But this is contest is won. Contest is over. Please represent, shout out and say hello. I love hearing from everyone. And I really loved talking to Josh this week. It was very cool sitting down, and we get into it. We get into the, I feel like I take a hard stance on my opinion on 21. And who knows? We're doing this because of the big Skybound silent issue month that we're in the midst of right now. Also, as I record this morning, the Transformers compendium went live over on Kickstarter for Skybound. So I'm sure everyone listening is somewhat of a Transformers fan. If you're not aware, that is currently live on Kickstarter. So you can go over there and kickstart your really expensive bound set like they did for the G.I. Joe set, but they're doing it for the Transformers. And it ain't cheap, but they're doing it. And yeah, that's where we're at. So sit down, sit back, relax. Maybe grab one of the 5 million reprints of G.I. Joe 21 that exist out there, and so you could read along with us. You'll laugh when you hear the interview. And and listen to us talk about the unofficial history of G.I. Joe number 21. And remember, shh, and enjoy the rest of your month, gang. But yeah, so let's talk about that. So I think there's a lot to talk about with 21.
Yes.
The second printing thing is one of the most fascinating things for me, because I think that's the first layer for most collectors of, is it authentic? Is it right? Is it real? That's one of the first things collectors think about when they're looking at any comic book, let alone 21, which has a little bit of a confusing history. So what was the journey to figure out what was a second print? What wasn't? What was a third print? What was a whatever print?
Well, it all started with, basically yojo.com put up, all the kind of history of number 21 back in the early 2000s, right? So I was doing the Yojo comic section, and it was I realized that there was a first printing, right? There was a newsstand and a direct market. Most people kind of understood that. And then there was a third printing with the little black Spidey head. But nobody had ever found a second printing. And of course, you had to look in the Indica to see second printing, right? Because you couldn't,
But didn't they not have that in there, though? Wasn't it missing on a lot?
So nobody had ever found one.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking in the early 2000s when people were kind of trying to, that's 25 years ago now, basically. And people were discovering, Mark Jewelers, and they were discovering Canadian variants and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't new, but for our generation as collectors who were basically coming back into it, it was trying to figure out why there's no second printing has ever appeared, right? I mean, nobody had ever found one, and still to this day, nobody's ever found one that has second printing on the Indica.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get from a first to a third? I mean, it's like a mystery, right? Like you don't go from 1 to 3 in printings, right? I mean, like the recent Skybounds are at like 11th printing, and they say on the cover 11th printing.
Right.
So they're still numbering them, you know?
Yeah.
So that was the impetus for trying to find it out. So back in the G.I. Joe forum time, you know, I mean, like before Facebook and before all that kind of stuff, everybody was trying to figure it out, right? I mean, and again, you're talking 20 years ago now, and one of the people that I interacted with way back when on the G.I. Joe Reloaded forum, which was just one of the comic ones. Do you remember that one?
Forum wise, no. I wasn't in the game.
Okay.
Then. Yeah.
So that was basically when Devil's Due had kicked back in.
I was Grunt when he left the service, and I hadn't yet come back from college.
Well, you know, again, so a lot of the people at that time, you know, the forums were all using avatar names. Nobody really knew who each other was. We only knew each other by avatar names and things like that. You know, not everybody did that. So anyway, that's when the mystery really began, because how do you go from 1 to 3? Where's 2?
Right. Yeah.
Right?
It's an obvious progression.
Yeah. So, you know, so then as we tried to solve that mystery, there just was no answers. And it was pre-Facebook, and Google wasn't really what it is now. And like you didn't have all those kind of things that are around now. So let's fast forward to 2020. COVID shuts down everything in America. And me and Roger Taft were like, hey, let's see if we can solve this problem, because we have all these people that are sitting at home and they can go look in their boxes, right?
Yeah,
they can pull out number 21 out of their box and see if somebody can find one. So so we put out this thing on General Joe's, that's Justin Bell's website, and so about let's hunt for it.
So you put out a call to everyone, look at your 21s.
Yes.
Okay.
Pull it out of your box and look and see
yeah.
if you can find somebody that has a second printing.
Yeah.
And we also put in qualifications, like, okay, it has to have a black Spidey head in the corner, right? Because in all likelihood, a second printing would have been during the black Spidey head time.
So to be clear, first printings are newsstand or old school Spidey head.
White Spidey head.
That's it.
Right.
If you're shopping and you see either that newsprint or white Spidey head, you're good to consider that a first printing.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's that was the original impetus for trying to figure it out, because we had these different Spidey heads. Now, what's really interesting is that in the history and doing research, literally G.I. Joe number 21 came out at the exact time that Marvel switched from the white Spidey head to the black Spidey head. Of course, that becomes Venom, but that was during the Secret Wars time when Spidey had the new black suit.
And strangely enough, for you collectors out there, everyone likes to point at Secret Wars number 8 as being the first appearance of the black suit as an alien. And technically, that's right, because that's when they reveal that it's an alien. But he actually appeared, if you want to get really technical, he appeared in like Marvel Age. You know, he appeared in some ads, but it was that issue of Spectacular and Amazing where he was on the cover in it. And they jumped their own gun in saying in their regular books, hey, look, he's got a new costume. Tune in 6 months later and we'll tell you where this costume came from over in Secret Wars. So that is one of the weirder vagaries of collecting, which is now coinciding with G.I. Joe because of the Black Spiderhead controversy, because technically he existed, but those issues hadn't come out yet.
Right.
So they hadn't switched the indicia yet. And here we go.
Right. So basically almost every second printing for G.I. Joe has a black Spidey head.
Right. Exactly.
But there are a few that don't, because there's a comic pack that has a 3, 4, and 5 where they are not, they don't have anything in the indica, and they have the white Spidey head, but they were printed with different ads. So you can look at the advertisements. So this became another clue on the second printing of number 21. Like, the ads would be different because the way the printings worked was whatever current ads Marvel was running was what they put in the second printing, right? So the first printing was the regular ones. So you can compare by ads, not only by the little indica, what's written on the indica third printing or second printing, also the Spidey head, but the advertisements. So we had these 3 clues in order to try to solve this. So as I mentioned earlier, Tommy Hazelton, who was a member of the G.I. Joe Reloaded forum, his name was Snake Shadow. Him and I interacted for about 5 years on that forum and never met each other personally. And then I had moved to Austin in the mid-2010s, and him and I connected, right? And then we just did this whole like, oh my God, you're Snake Shadow, and I was Antarctica. That was my avatar name. And we were like, oh my God, we've known each other for like 10 years, but like, hadn't met each other. And so then when we interacted a lot, and he has a really unique story, is that his very first comic was a Marvel subscription of G.I. Joe number 21. No words. So he thought for an entire month that comics did not have words.
Funny. That's funny.
So his literally, and then number 22 showed up and it had words and then he got it. So he has been a big 21 like hunter, right?
Yeah,
just like collector and like
because that had an emotional place in his heart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course he's a big G.I. Joe fan and we had a long history. So in the I'd say the late 2010s, him and I were really interacting, and then Roger Taft, who helped me like get all into the international collecting and all this stuff, and had a lot of knowledge. But like again, we didn't have Google at the time.
Yeah. So you reached out, and were you able to find any no second prints surfaced?
So nothing with second printing in the indica.
Right. So on your book, and by the way, just to remind everyone from the intro, we're looking at the history of G.I. Joe number 21, which will be, I believe, up top of this episode. We talk about a giveaway, listeners. So tune into that if you're for some reason skip the first top because you don't want to hear me talk. We're looking at it's like page 56, 57, where you're talking about this hunt for 21. So the direct market symbol is a big deal. The collector hunt, no one had one.
Correct. So this is 2020, right?
Right.
So we're recording this today is 2025. And so we put that call out and everybody's stuck in their homes and we had hundreds of people on different forums and different, Facebook and other things saying, no, I didn't find anything. But I did find that mine was a newsprint, and I didn't realize I had a newsprint, or I found a third printing.
That was me.
Right.
About mid 2000, I always thought I had a first print, just because when I was a kid, I assumed I was getting a first print. Never went to look back. Oh yeah, I totally didn't. I bought my first print in the mid 2010s.
So you had a third print for most of your.
I had a third print for most of my life because I bought it super early. It was probably one of the first 20 books that I ever bought.
Oh, nice.
But I had no idea what any of that meant. I just saw it for a good price because at the time it was expensive, and I was like, oh, there's a version that's a little cheaper. Yeah. And totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and the third printing these days, I mean, like even on some of the CGCs and things like that, like, it's a couple $100.
Well, nowadays it's I mean, and technically it works this way for older stuff too, but it's because those other printings have much smaller print runs,
right?
So they're technically more rare, right? Even though they're considered a third printing, they are more rare. So if you get a small print run and it's a really good looking cover, which the reprints tend to be, you can see those spike a lot more than the first printings. Did you have? If I'm remembering, I put maybe it was Roger, but I tried to get you or Roger in touch with Scott Rosenberg.
Maybe
I think it was Roger, and
Roger,
because a friend of mine, Scott, and if anyone knows him, and this gets back to him, I don't think he's a listener, but he's out here. He used to work in the comic industry, worked for Malibu for a long time, was part of setting up the Ultraverse and in early days of Image and all that stuff. He told me he's responsible for all the reprints of G.I. Joes.
Really?
Yeah, he and his buddy, friend of his, I don't remember the name, but they were the ones who went to Marvel and said, we want to reprint all your G.I. Joe stuff. So he might have
put them in those packs.
Put them in those packs, exactly. Marvel wasn't reprinting G.I. Joe at the time. So this is an anecdotal story he told me once, and I was like, well, that's fascinating.
Well,
and I've never gotten him on the show to talk about it. I haven't seen him in years. I used to work for him briefly. I was an intern for him when I first moved out here. He's a card. But he might have the answer to this.
Right.
If we can nail him down. He's out here in Hollywood. He's doing his thing. He's Scott Rosenberg. He's doing his thing. But he claims to be the one to have done literally the person behind these second printings.
Right. So that leads to the answer of this whole number 21 second printing.
Yeah.
Right. So in 2020, we put out the call. We put it in our first book, the volume 1. Hey, look, we don't have the information at that time. And so then, fast forward, 4 years later, and I'm putting together this book that we're talking about, which is the unofficial history of G.I. Joe number 21.
Unofficial history.
Yes, exactly.
G.I. Joe number 21.
No words. The joke is it's an 80-page book on a 22-page comic with no words. And so about 15 pages in this book are tracking our history. So we had originally put out the call on the General Joe site, then we put it in our book, and then we started getting all this information, right? Because people knew what to hunt for or what not to hunt for, which was different things.
Yeah.
So ultimately, we found three black Spidey heads that had no indica notation of third printing.
Okay.
So we originally thought that was going to be what the answer was.
Yeah.
And again, this is like when you have a theory, right? You put out the theory, and
test
sometimes
it, see,
information comes in and it changes the theory or proves the theory right.
It's called the scientific method.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Somebody got on my case for getting it wrong. I'm like, it was a theory.
It's a scientific method, man. That's what you do. You put a theory out there, you test it.
And that's exactly what we did in 2020.
Okay.
So by 2024, I mentioned Tommy Hazelton earlier. He found the answer, right? So the answer is, and it's good that maybe this is where Scott Rosenberg, yeah, could really give us the answer, was that a white Spidey head, number 21, in a bag with number 21, 22, and 23, because the answer became number 22 and number 23 are second printings in that bag. So it's the Marvel Comics bag. And
So there are people, and I may be one of them, with a white Spidey head that is technically a second printing, but it's not marked as such. So and there's no other way to determine it other than if it's actually still in the bag.
We have not been able to determine, and I have one. And Tommy found a couple of them.
It's still in the bag?
It's still in the bag.
Oh, wow.
And I used like a little X-Acto knife kind of thing to open it up and see that there was nothing in there. And I kind of, you could see the back.
Unfortunately, you kind of have to destroy it to double check
so I was not about to
it's worth
open
it,
it.
But it's worth it.
So I opened the edges a little bit to see in there. And you can see that there's no third printing on the end, right?
Yeah.
And it's a white Spidey head, and it has the regular first printing advertisement on the back.
Got it.
Right? Which is a Frogger.
Yeah. And
it's a Frogger advertisement.
And we're sure that this wasn't just first printings that were slid into on a production run with second printings. That's the question.
So all likelihood that is the case, but the fact is that 22 and 23 are also second printings in that bag.
Right. So they would have been. So by the time you get to it, so let's work this out. By the literally calendar time, by the calendars that pass, days that pass, by the time you get to them saying, let's do a second and third printing of 22 and 23.
Right.
Literally all the copies of 21, the first printing, the actual true, genuine, real world first printing copies of 21, however they're labeled.
Right.
They're gone. They're not sitting at the printer waiting. You know what I mean? Like they're not sitting at a printer waiting to be to be held. Now, maybe if you wanted to find a reason how they could get there is maybe they're sitting at a distributor and a distributor for some reason says we've got crates, boxes of these 21s that we haven't sold, which is nuts to think because I can't imagine that book was a hit when it hit.
Yes.
So the only way for a true physical first print to make its way into those second print bags would have been to been recalled from a distributor or sitting around at the printing warehouse and just thrown in there. And that's something I find hard to believe because you wouldn't even get to the second and third printing months ahead,
Right.
till months later, for 22 and 23.
So the investigation part of this mystery, right, became, when did these bags start?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Good question.
Right?
Right. That's a very good question.
So there was one and two of them beforehand. We had, like I said, had a 3, 4, and a 5, and they are second printings. They have different ads. And that came probably about 5 to 6 months before the 21. Because, again, we're talking like, at this point now, Marvel or the G.I. Joe Real American Hero series is probably pushing 23, 24, 25.
Okay.
Somewhere in there, as 21 has already
So
come
they
out.
were already making those 3 bags in the teens.
So
in the G.I. Joe teens.
Yes, in the
Okay,
teens.
they were.
But
Okay.
there was only a couple of them. And then, of course, you have the Marvel head switch, right? From white to black. So they probably wanted to get rid of the white ones, right? Put the black ones in there. And then after that, and this is where Tommy really did a lot of investigation. He actually got some like other bagged ones, like where A-Team and Smurfs and things.
Yeah.
Where they have.
I had the A-Team 3-bagger.
Do you?
I had, not anymore, but that's how I got my A-Team. I absolutely bought it from the A-Team 3-bagger.
Right,
Yeah.
and those are second printings, and they're not. They kind of fall in that same category. Some of them are labeled.
they're
some
second
of them
printings?
Some of them.
Oh, I've never looked.
Right. So, but again, it's a whole transit. There's like a transition that happened right with this mystery. And So the answer, and I'm going to read it. I kind of was reading it a little bit here.
Go for it.
I'm going to read the answer that we found.
Go for it. And this is from the aforementioned Unofficial History of G.I. Joe number 21, the After Action Report book. Which, if you're not reading the After Action Report books, all of them, you need to get on that train.
So the conclusion is, the number 21 second printing can be found in a Marvel Comics multi-pack, still sealed, that contains number 21, 22, 23, and are sold for $1.69 with a blue label on the top. So they're also, so if
That's
you take,
very specific.
If you take it out of the bag, it becomes
You're ruining your provenance.
correct.
Of it being a
it
second
basically
print. Yeah.
becomes a regular
There's no
white
way to prove
Spidey
it.
head.
Yeah.
There's no way to prove it. And again, basically just by briefly being able to like lift up the pages a little bit, we've confirmed that is.
Yeah, and I like that you identified the look of the actual plastic bag itself. Were there any versions in a plastic bag that don't resemble that? Like you said, with the blue top?
The third printing does come in its own pack, but it's not 21, 22, and 23.
Got it.
I forget what the numbers are, but they're like odd numbers, and 21 is in there, and it has the black Spidey head, and if you open it and like looking it up, it's third printing.
Okay.
So the third printing does come in a bag, but it's different. So the key is it's 21, 22, and 23, and that was the answer. Just to prove the theory. So
that's great.
Originally, our theory kind of was that it would be a black Spidey head with no indica of second printing, right? And we did find a couple of those. So, how do you prove something, right? Exactly.
Well, the
scientific method.
But
how
also,
do you prove it?
Yeah. So that's also part of this is that the cover is separate from where the indicia is.
Right.
So the indicia is on the inside of the printed press piece.
Yes.
So those might have been first run copies of the interior pages that they that they had overruns on. Right?
Yeah, maybe.
Because printing is not a very precise process, right?
Especially in the 80s.
Yeah, especially in the 80s. So you order 10,000, it was a lot more back then. But you order, even then, actually at those bigger numbers, it is much more. So you order
400,000.
Right, you order 400,000 copies. They're technically running, Mary Jane's very excited about this. They're technically running, 403,000. That's 3,000 or 4,000 extra books, because it just runs so fast and there's just so much. So those, and those are called, not blanks.
Overruns.
Well, it's overruns. Yeah, I used to be in the publishing, so my old boss right now is currently screaming at a podcast he's not listening to right now. But those overruns, those exist, and they could be, you can slap any cover you want on them.
Okay.
So there's a world where the interiors of those are the first print interiors, and they had extras, and they then slapped a second print cover on it.
Oh, see?
Or they started running the second print. Someone realized they forgot to change the indicia and slap the second print stamp on it.
Yeah.
And then they paused and fixed it. You know what I mean? Like, all that stuff is absolutely very possible, especially back then.
Yeah, and the thing is that there's nobody to confirm any of that.
Yeah.
We actually did ask Jim Shooter, was
And he punched you in the face.
chief of Marvel at the time, and he basically said, "I don't know."
Yeah, you know what?
Because he wouldn't have known.
He wouldn't have known.
But who else do you ask?
No,
I mean, we've asked Larry. Larry doesn't know. I mean, like, where's the Marvel person that was in charge of that?
Well,
now, maybe it's the Scott. Who you've said that's new information you just told me now.
Yeah.
So maybe he can find an answer.
So we'll try to get you in touch with him again. I know maybe it was Roger that was this goes back when we first met, so 4 or 5 years or something. I definitely try to put one of you guys in touch with him. It would have been a production person. Probably someone like, unfortunately he passed away, but like Mark Grunwald might have that information. But someone in that production level. There's a guy over DC. His name is, he used to do the DC bullpen bulletins, and he wrote for DC 2. Don't scream it at your podcast. You're only going to hurt your own ears, guys, because you know who I'm talking about. But he's really accessible online, but he was in the production side too, as well as writing. I'm thinking of Bob Rozakis. He knows a lot of those old stories. So like I've asked him, I've seen a ton of people ask him questions online about old DC production stuff. Like, hey, why did this come out that way? Or why did that series stop? Or why did this book get published like this? And he'll remember, or he'll know who to ask. Right. And they're often people that none of us have any idea who they are. You know, because they're just dudes that were working in the shop.
Exactly. And
so that's who you got to get a hold of. You got to get a hold of those production people. Someone, Peter did was marketing.
Well, that's clearly the next step of our theory.
That's your answer.
To find that person or the people involved in that, and to actually say, okay, how did that get inside that bag?
That's who you got to go to.
And why was it never stamped?
Well, you know what? I mean, when we're done here, we'll try to get you in touch with Scott. Scott's an elusive fellow. Yeah, I say that with all the love in my heart. All right. He's an elusive fellow. He's hard to trap. He's hard to nail down. There's a reason I haven't had him on the show. He's hard to trap down. But every time I cross paths, he's always like, "Oh my God, yeah, let's do it." And then it's hard to get in touch with because he's a busy. Well,
now you have a very specific
Hollywood guy.
Very specific question to a very big issue in the G.I. Joe community.
We'll send it. We'll send it after this. So we jumped right into that, and that's probably like one of the biggest mysteries around 21. But this book that you put together is just chock full of every little bit of minutia reference to issue 21 that you could possibly imagine. You've got internal memos on it. You've got places where that may have inspired it. You've got a gallery of all of the variant covers that have homaged it, right?
Yeah.
It's literally every homage to 21, every
this
reprint of 21 that up until this book was published in
2024. So last year.
Yeah. So like every single version of issue number 21, you have accounted for in your companion, the unofficial history of G.I. Joe number 21.
Yeah. Well, of course, now it's a year later,
and it's all out of date. We're gonna throw it in the garbage.
There's the cover gallery is out of date. The information, interviews, and the biographies of all the people involved in the story. That's all.
Some of these homage covers are great though.
Yeah.
Like
there's probably about 2 more pages of homage covers.
Since in the last year,
probably. Actually, part of the impetus for this, talking about number 21 here is that starting at the beginning of April, right? Skybound is re-releasing number 21 with some new covers.
Yeah.
Then they're releasing 5 new original issues from 5 characters that are all silent.
So listeners, when you hear this, we'll be right in the middle of April. So some of this will all have already dropped. My guess is it doesn't make any sense for Skybound to be doing that unless that's also the month they're going to finally bring Snake Eyes into the series. I mean, and this is pure speculation.
Right.
We're recording this like mid-March.
Right. And
there's no other reason to be doing this focus on issue 21 other
Right.
than that's also the month they're finally revealing who their version of Snake Eyes
right.
is.
So let's clarify. So for the Silent Mission Skybound month is 5 books, all within the Real American Hero Larry Hama continuity, but
It's
not
in the Hama continuity.
Yes,
Okay.
but not written by Larry Hama. The 5
Right.
issues are all written by other
Right.
writers. Now, the
Written or art directed? Let's be real here.
Well, you still
I
have to
feel
write
like
the you have to write the actions. What
Story
happens.
told. And I'm joking with that, by the way.
Yes.
I'm not.
Well, I mean, part
I'm
of
not. That's not a slam on any writers of this, but I do feel it's a little more plot and art direction.
Right.
But you know.
Well, I mean, the
that's
history
why
of 21 is that Larry Hama went and drew it himself in a weekend.
Yeah, because he didn't have time.
Because he didn't have time. He didn't write any words because he's like, I don't need to drive words.
Yeah,
I'm an artist. I
'cause
can
he's a
draw
great
it.
storyteller.
And he drew it, and then
Yeah.
Steve Lealo inked it, and it was colored and
Well,
done.
listen. Well, yeah. So finish. So the plan for the month is 5 stories.
Right, 5
in
stories.
Hama's universe.
It's Beachhead, Spirit, Jinx, Roadblock, and Duke. Each one gets an issue, and it's all within the. So, what you were hinting at, and potentially could happen, is in the Skybound Energon universe, Snake Eyes has not been introduced. Scarlet has, and the Jinx and the Rashikage, and Storm Shadow, but not Snake Eyes. So if your theory is potential, and again we're recording this in mid-March now, your theory is that maybe they're going to introduce Snake Eyes in the Energon universe in connection with all of this. So that's a very interesting theory. But ultimately, what it is it's honoring probably one of the greatest comic books in all of comic book history, number 21.
Right.
But they might do that. Who knows? Again, this is you're making a prediction. And
That is my prediction.
Yeah.
And,
but
now I could be wrong, and certainly Lord knows I've been proven wrong many times.
well, again, it's a prediction.
But it makes
right?
sense. I just thinking marketing wise. Why would you do it? Because I got to throw this out there. I am on this. I am on the side of exhaustion over 21.
Yeah.
I am 100% an exhaustion over 21.
I wrote
can't
a whole
lie.
book about it.
No. I can't lie about that. I'm not gonna backtrack. I do love it, so there's no lack of love there.
Right.
But with all the from like the collector side, like Super 7 put out like 3 or 4 versions of the 21 Snake Eyes card figure, and I was like, I'm done. And then you go to San Diego last year, and there's another version of it, and I'm like, and that's our special show special. I'm like, are you real? Are you real? We need another 21 Snake Eyes show. I'm done with that. Like it was too much. It's too much. Like let it simmer for a little bit. Let's marinate and come back. So when they announced this, I'm again, can't lie. I was like,
right,
because now it's Skybound. So now Skybound has to have their say on how great 21 is. However, in my head, the only reason to do that is because it's timing with the intro to Snake Eyes. And that's just total speculation, but it just makes sense. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But
Skybound with their $3 million Kickstarter compendium had a number 21 cover, but it has Storm Shadow on it. So it's like a different cover, but it's still number 21.
Yeah.
So we're still getting them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And that's also that too.
Yeah.
With that, which I love, I have 0 complaints about. This is not a complaint about that compendium. I love it with all those variants. But again, I was like, okay, more variants.
Right. And
there's other books we could have done cool variants for. Like I don't, you know what I mean? Like there's other stuff to mine with 21. Right. I'm talking to the man who wrote the book on it. But what you didn't exist before. Homage covers existed.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We've seen this. We've seen just reprints. You brought and I've got it too somewhere, but you brought the IDW put out the 40th anniversary of it.
Yes.
Their hardcover book, which is cool that was a cool piece to celebrate, you know. But like we've seen it reprinted over and over and over again.
It's reprinted probably about 40, I would say about 30 times in English.
Yeah.
And it probably reprinted it
but
about
does
another
it matter
10 to
what
12
language
times
it's
in other
reprinted
languages.
But does it matter
well,
though?
the
some
computer
signs, right?
screen is usually in the other language.
Right.
And sometimes the the word grenade is changed a
Oh,
little
really?
in terms of the spelling, and
Oh,
sometimes the
well,
numbers.
you brought along some foreign versions.
I did.
Do you have them, or they were behind
Yeah, they're
you?
right behind you.
They're
Yeah.
right behind me.
So
yeah, these are cool. So we'll talk action. Well, actually, listeners, you heard the Joe and I on Action Force stuff, so you heard us talk about Action Force.
Right.
So we'll get to that one in a second. But the first one you got is Quebec.
Yep. So that's the French. It's called Editions Heritage or Heritage Editions, and in Canada, in order to print a comic book, you had to print it in English and in French, and so that's generally considered the first GI Joes that were not in English.
Interesting.
Because they were printing those in the early 80s, 82, 83, because of the rules in Canada regarding...
So in order to release your English language comic book,
Yes.
you also had to release a
Right.
certain number of them in French.
And so there's it's called Editions Heritage, and they were doing everything, DC and Marvel at the time, in French.
Oh, that's
so
great.
that's generally considered the first one.
That's great.
And then about 89, the one that we're here is a Denmark one, and there's some. There's probably about 20 countries that it was released in.
I like the Denmark one. Well, they're awesome. They're both great.
Yeah.
The Quebec French one is more of a straight reprint of the cover.
Right.
It's even got the blocky. Well, let's talk about that real quick. Well, let me finish this thought, then we're going to circle back. It's got the like thick marker signature on the bottom, which for years I always thought was someone writing on the cover because it's so thick
Right.
and blocky.
One of the few times in the early 80s when the cover artist's name were on the cover.
So the Denmark edition is actually it's like they cleaned it up a little bit. So you're saying this is from a couple years later?
Yeah, the majority of the international books outside of the North America came out in 87.
Got it. And it's
when the cartoon hit the airways in those countries and they released comics. And some of them were short run, 10, 12 issues. Others were long. I mean, like Finland ran into 96 when G.I. Joe was over in America, and they were still releasing comics.
It's got the Action Force logo, and then in the corner, my Denmark, or what language, they speak Finnish there?
Flemish.
Flemish. My Flemish is poor, but I'm assuming it's an advertisement for the G.I. Joe cartoon airing on their Super Channel.
Google Translate is amazing. Again,
because
back
it's got
in the day,
a little TV in the corner. So this was like an advertisement for the cartoon airing over there. So let's real quick get onto this cover. There was controversy for a long time. Not controversy, but forgetfulness of who actually drew the cover, right?
Well, again, in the 80s, they didn't label who did the covers.
Right.
People just in the Marvel bullpen did the covers.
So who drew this?
So it's Klaus Janson and Ed Hannigan.
It's Hannigan and Janson.
I think Klaus actually was the colorist, and Ed Hannigan was the artist.
And there was a lot. I mean,
and they only did those.
Yeah,
they didn't
there wasn't
do anything else.
Right,
really.
exactly. Yeah, they didn't do like the previous ones, and then they moved on to it. So there wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't well known for a long time that it was Klaus and Hannigan.
Right, and of course, Klaus has won many Eisners.
And Klaus and Hannigan, weren't they the team on Daredevil at the time after Miller left?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so they just must have popped over and did this.
So they were in the bullpen.
Yeah,
right. The Marvel bullpen was just like, okay, let's. Here, you work on this. Don't get any credit. I mean, like literally, just recently, the letterer Rick Parker was the guy who lettered the credits, and so he's not even listed because there's no words. But he did the credits, and just the And so now he recently pointed out that he did it. So now
that's great.
There's in the most recent version of the 21 reprint. They've added his name, Rick Parker, as the letterer because he just lettered the credits. There's nothing else to letter.
Is that the same Rick Parker from Beavis and Butthead?
He did everything.
Yeah.
He was the letterer for G.I. Joe and for all kinds of Marvel. I think he worked for Marvel for like 20 years. So he's now a part of 21 in a new way in the last few years. And literally they added his name to the credits in the book. Well, so it's still growing. Yeah. I mean, that's what's amazing about number 21.
That cover is so strong for many, many reasons. But Ed Hannigan, his Batman covers, and then Klaus Janson, his stuff, those are two, like, their art oozes strength and just pop. And like, there's nothing soft about either of their styles. Yeah. So I think we know why that cover is freaking amazing. And even when you look at all the other homages, they're cool and they look fine. Right. But none of them that I've seen, we'd have to
Right.
really take that for me. They don't pop like this one does.
No.
Because they're more of like the pose, like, oh, we're doing the same pose and it's cute and funny.
Right.
This cover is like,
I mean, he's getting fired at.
Yeah. This is more than
Bullets are
just the
flying at
pose.
him.
This is a statement picture.
Yeah.
This really is a statement picture, and pretty much all the homages, and
Right.
we could, it's debatable, I guess, but they're just more homage pictures
Right.
than they are a statement drawing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I love about that cover.
And that the original 11 by 12 cover recently went for auction like 3 years ago. It's in the book for like $300,000.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so it was the original one. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big number.
It's a huge number.
Just for one piece of paper.
That's a huge.
It's
number.
not the whole book.
It's got to
It's
be the most
just-
expensive piece of GI Joe art.
Yeah.
I can't imagine anything else beating that.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, individual books don't matter, and a lot of times, like the art, interior artwork, like you're getting one page or something like that, not the cover of the most famous one. I mean, I actually do have an article in the book about who owns all the original art, and he paid somewhere in the 5 figures.
Yeah, sure.
His name's Gene. What's his
and
last
his
name?
Address is
30.
30.
Yeah, exactly. He's a New York City guy, and he got it from Hama directly.
Yeah, sure.
So, but this was like 15 years ago, and he still owns it.
Oh, yeah, that's something you hold on to.
Yeah, I know. It's in the book because it was in a newspaper and it was in a magazine article, and you can look at it. And I put it in there. I don't remember what page it's on, but so that covers that. But he owns that, but he never got the cover. And I did see an online article when that cover sold of him. Did he want to get it? And he was like, well, it was out of my price range. Because he has all the 21 pages, right?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
the 22 of the 21 pages.
Well, that's when you do it. That's when you pull like a monopoly kind of trade.
Right.
Like you go to him, like, all right, listen.
Yeah.
I have 3 children here. Would you like one of them and give me that so I can collect all the pieces of Boardwalk? I will sell you my children for
Right,
that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, this is what, as G.I. Joe fans, we are toy people, cartoon people, and comic people, right?
Yeah.
We're not the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're not like, dealing with X-Men, all that stuff. Like, if you're a G.I. Joe fan, like, yes, you're tangentially a Marvel fan because it was a Marvel Comics, but
Sure.
it wasn't that universe. We were our own thing. So, I mean, as a kid, I collected, DC and Marvel and G.I. Joe, but I never really cared much about, like, I got Superman and I had Wolverine and X-Men, and I didn't care about mixing between Marvel and DC. Some people were very much like that as a kid, but I was like, give me G.I. Joe.
Sure.
Right? And
Yeah.
it's,
and G.I. Joe fans, I think it's the 3 pillars. It's what you just said. There are people who are just, they're here for the action figures. There are people who, love the cartoons and are cartoon first. And then there are people who are comic book first. Probably the cartoon first are the smallest number. Now, but back then it was, it was massive. And then, and I think it's obviously Transformers could fall into that category, but that's a pretty unique space from fandom wise.
Of course, Transformers copied what G.I. Joe did in 1982 because Transformers came out in 84.
And He-Man, while He-Man's had comic book success, they don't really have comic book success. They're not, there's not this massive catalog of He-Man comics to reprint. You could collect them all in a big omnibus, Transformers, obviously they're doing that new big omnibus soon. There's very few other fandoms that have those 3 pillars that are strong enough to,
and that have
and
lasted.
there's certain bleed. Obviously, there's bleed. There's bleed over. I came from it cartoon first, really. And I love the cartoon, and I think I once I got into it from the cartoon and the figures. Then I quickly loved the comic book more, then the cartoon, and then the figures.
Right.
And then I think that's kind of where my love has settled of comic, cartoon, figures.
Right. Okay.
And as far as like the vintage old stuff, and it's just because I'm not a massive action figure guy these days.
Right.
But there's not many fandoms that can say that.
Right. And I mean, maybe the only other one really is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. Totally.
I mean, that comic came out in '88.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
there's not even a maybe. You're 100% right.
So but again, that you're talking like 7 years after GI Joe.
yeah, but
so,
there's still though. There are comic
Right.
fans. There are
Right.
the cartoon
And that
fans,
was like-
and there's the movie fans. Frankly,
Yeah.
they have one up on us.
Yeah.
Is the movies, which our movies are garbage.
yeah, yeah, and you know, I mean, but again, that wasn't like an underground comic. It wasn't Marvel Comics. You
Sure.
know what I mean? It was.
Yeah.
It had a very different comic start for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles compared to.
But it was still
Transformers and
It
just-
was still massive.
It
I
became
mean, it's-
massive.
Yeah. But it
But
was.
I think GI Joe out the gate and Transformers out the gate
completely
were
totally.
so
It was.
So maybe
Absolutely massive
between those
launch.
three 1980s properties, that's about all, and they're all still going strong
Yeah.
to a certain degree.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
you think 80s, you think of those three, you think of Thundercats. That doesn't match. You
Yeah,
think of
it doesn't.
He-Man. As great as He-Man is,
Yeah.
no shade on He-Man. He-Man doesn't have
And
those pillars.
those toys sold like crazy for like 2-3 years,
Yeah.
and then dropped off.
Yeah,
the-
although I would say
cliff.
like they're very healthy. I don't know what sales are, I guess, but there's a lot of He-Man toys these days. So I would say
Right.
like the toy is really healthy these days.
Right.
Cartoon is not.
I think isn't Kevin Smith
He did it. He did one of the cartoons, which like cracked the fandom
or
in
the
half.
comic too, maybe or something.
Yeah,
but-
but it's it's
They had a long gap in
yeah,
time.
they had a very long gap. Thundercats, those are the, like that's the stuff of discussion. Smurfs, they only had a cartoon. They were as far as
Right.
massive
Yeah.
impact at the time. Cabbage Patch Kids were just really the toy. They never crossed over into anything else.
I mean, you're wearing a Star Wars shirt. Star Wars is
Oh,
a
it's Star Wars.
movie first.
Yeah,
So that doesn't
obviously
even
Star Wars
that
massive.
falls out of the category of
And Star Wars gave up on the comic game,
Yeah.
and quite frankly, that comic was not very influential.
Right,
It
no.
really wasn't. Like in
No.
retrospect, people go, "Oh, whatever," but
because they were totally doing their own thing.
yeah,
I
there
mean,
were,
none of
and
those
some
stories
are
made-
better than others, but
Yeah.
a lot of it doesn't really fit into
Right.
canon. It just feels out of whack.
Yeah.
It wasn't guided by one vision like Hama was.
Right.
And then when Dark Horse took over, they absolutely did some good stuff, but
Yes.
there was just a glut of stuff.
And
So
that's that
yeah.
time frame of Star Wars when there was no movie and
Yeah.
no movie coming, and there was the Heir to the Empire book came out
Oh,
and then
man.
the comics.
I was
and
so
it's like-
excited when those books came
Yeah,
out. I
it was
loved them.
amazing.
I still love them. I've reread them
You know?
recently. I used to work in the movie theater, and we were right next door to a bookstore, one of the chains that doesn't exist anymore. And I would go next door and be like, "Did you get part 2 of Heir to the Empire yet? Did you get it yet?" And they're like, "No, it's coming out in a month." We go, "Come on back, dude. We're excited for it." I'm like, "I can't wait." So
Yeah.
that's what I would. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
such a fan of the Heir to the Empire.
So
stuff.
again, that's books,
Yeah.
not comics,
Right, right.
cartoons.
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
Star Wars doesn't even
Yeah.
fall into that category.
Well, I'll say that. So then that's, I think that's the frontier that G.I. Joe has dabbled in, but never really found success, is the book. I think,
Yeah,
the
there's
printed-
one
the
book
printed-
that I know of, and
There's
it was
a few,
just
like
recently.
Hearts and Minds was that short story thing. I think Max,
Yeah.
I think
Brooks.
Max Brooks,
Yeah.
he edited that. They did those 6 prose novels in the 80s. I've got all those, and they're fun. They're totally
yeah,
fun.
the Find Your Fate ones.
Also those. That's an
Oh, the
addition.
novel ones,
There's
too.
6 novels,
There's-
straight novels,
yes,
and then
yes.
there's the Find Your Fates. I don't even know how many. There's like 16 of those or something.
I don't know. We can look in volume
Yeah.
one.
Oh yeah,
They're
yeah,
in volume one.
Yeah, there's a lot of those, but like as far as like
20, I think.
yeah, you look at the prose success that like Star Trek had, and
Right.
there isn't really although there's a lot of crazy fanfic out there.
Yeah. Well, there's.
I remember years ago we found some adult themed text fanfic on Amazon, and we
I don't
were
know if I want to put that in my head.
No,
This
no,
is the kind of thing you forget.
I talked about it on the show. I remember this. I was looking for. It was when Amazon did the self-published
the
fanfic
Worlds.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
the
Worlds
Worlds things.
It's Cobra's.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cobra's origin.
Yeah.
And so I was looking for that, and I came and it was same type of thing where someone wrote it and printed it for free on Amazon. They don't do that service
Right.
anymore, or had it hosted for
Yeah.
free or for purchase. And it was totally like the Baroness walked in on Scarlet. Their eyes locked. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. What are we doing?
See, I don't want that in my head.
I don't want it in my head either. But
Stop.
so I think that's the one. And obviously we need a good movie, but we certainly have had movies,
Yeah.
to not be a total downer on that. So yeah, I think a good prose, but no one reads books anymore, so it doesn't really matter.
I mean,
But imagine a series of books
Hasbro did try something. It's called Declassified, or no, it's called Just Classified, and it's a book written for kids. I have them, and it takes place in high school.
Oh, that's
so
okay,
Scarlet
sure.
Duke and Snake Eyes are high school kids.
Yeah.
Right? It's very different.
Not for me, but okay.
But it's
sure.
actually really well written, and it's cool because they're trying to discover, like, Cobra has infiltrated their high school or something like that. I mean, it's
selling drugs.
It's written, yeah, kind of
The
doing
head
bad
man
things.
walks in.
Exactly.
Hey, kids.
And Duke is an adult who's the principal, right? And so
You don't make that Hawk?
no, it's
Duke's not the captain of the football team?
Yeah, no.
Who's hanging out with the artistic kids?
Or no, maybe it. No, I.
Oh yeah,
Duke.
you might be right. Yeah,
I'm
I'm not correcting you there.
Anyway,
but yeah.
I read there's two of them.
Yeah.
And they just came out like maybe in the last 2 years.
Okay.
So that's a few pros things, but it was very different take.
Yeah, but like those Reacher books.
Yeah.
There's a million of those, like
Okay.
those
Yeah.
I guess what I'm thinking of is like
Yeah, I mean,
like
how
the
many
they call them airline novels, right?
Right.
You buy they're not
Yeah.
the most in-depth prose,
Yeah.
but they're a fun action adventure.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of Star Wars books are like that too.
Yeah,
they're just fun reads.
Totally like that, and they are fun reads. I'm not knocking them at all.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kind of books that we should be getting into GI Joe.
Yeah.
and just
Something.
just give me some fun,
Yeah.
and go deep, man. Go, bring in one ringer.
Yeah.
To get people's attention, like put
Right.
Snake Eyes on the
Yeah.
book, but
Yeah.
then have it be Snake Eyes teaming up with whatever Battle Force 2000,
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's just
Yeah.
Battle Force 2000 and Snake Eyes running the game.
Yeah.
That'd be great. I
That
don't know
would
what that
be-
story would be. Probably
well,
dumb,
and-
but it would be. But that'd be a fun like
As long
those.
as it's fun, though.
yeah.
That's
That would
what's
be one
cool.
of those travel book reads.
Yeah.
That's I'm calling you out right now.
Yeah.
Whether it would be Skybound or Hasbro, whoever would be responsible for that. Let's
So-
get into that a little bit.
Yeah. So, and I think, that's where, G.I. Joe hasn't been able to figure it out. I mean, like, obviously comics and Hama and now the Energon universe are just nonstop.
Killing it.
Right? Just killing it.
Love it.
And the toys, I was just looking before coming here that the Skybound Void Rivals is going to have a toy at San Diego.
Oh, yeah, I
it's
saw
the
that,
two, Derek and Sola and Jetfire.
Yeah.
So this is what is potentially amazing about Skybound is that now they're going to do Skybound toys.
Yeah.
They're already doing it. They've already announced. So there could be a whole lot more coming. In fact, I think there's a new Skybound Optimus Prime coming because in the comics
He's got Megatron's arm.
Yeah. So
It's a good look.
I
It's a
think
good
that
look for
toy
him.
is coming.
Yeah, it should. That's
I
a good
think-
look for him.
yeah,
Yeah.
so-
that Dark
so-
Nemesis, or Nemesis Prime, whatever
Yeah.
they call him when he's evil,
Uh-huh.
that sells like hotcakes.
Yeah.
People love that look for Optimus.
Yeah. And so this
I was
is-
just at TFCon last week.
Oh, nice.
Like maybe you catch that Energon stank on me. Yeah.
Was there a big? I didn't go to it, but was there a fair big presence on Energon Universe stuff there?
Oh yeah. Big Clutch was there selling his Energon books, his Energon variants.
Big Clutch.
Sean Kirkham used to be over at Skybound.
Yeah, he's made a good deal with getting all those exclusives.
Well,
and
yeah,
things like that.
he used to be he was the
Yeah.
right-hand man over there forever.
Yeah.
So he better have a good deal. And
Yeah.
his covers are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a big table of stuff. A lot of dealers had a lot of the newer stuff.
Nice.
I talked briefly about it. I think all the G.I. Joe stuff was picked over by the time I got there on Sunday.
Right.
Because there wasn't a ton. But I've been there in previous years, and there always was some form
Yeah.
of good G.I. Joe stuff I can get, loose figures and all that stuff. So they got picked over. But because, those Worlds Collide. It's funny, I saw a guy running around there dressed as Black Suit Spider-Man. And at first, my brain went, why are you? Because there's a ton of cosplay at
Right.
TFCon. Just random, even normal people, not like super deluxe. And I was like, why are you? And I went, oh, that's the greatest. Because he is part of their universe. Because he's on the cover
Yeah.
of, what is it, 3 or 2?
Yeah, Transformers 3.
Yeah, because it's so like,
Yeah.
he totally is on the
And
cover.
Spider-Man is in Transformers in that comic.
Right.
So, just as a side note, that's how G.I. Joe is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because that Transformers comic crosses over with Gen 2. It's the same story with G.I. Joe, and those characters appear in G.I. Joe 39 to 42.
Yeah.
So that makes it part of the Marvel.
Oh, yeah. No, it totally is. No, it absolutely is. Yeah.
In a very
it's funny, though,
roundabout
because
way,
in one of
but
those
still
early
there.
issues of G.I. Joe, if you remember, they don't they parachute and they land on a guy
Hulk.
cosplaying as Hulk?
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
Somehow they run into someone dressed up as Hulk.
Yeah, and I just saw on Facebook that I had totally forgotten about. In number 27, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow are chasing through New York, and somebody, as Storm Shadow goes by, he goes, "Is that Moon Knight?"
Yeah, right.
And
yep.
I was like, "Oh, I totally forgot about that." It's so you know, I mean, it's like
it's all there to be had.
It's all there, yeah.
It's all there to be had. I love stuff like that. So yeah, this you did a great job with
thank you very
21
much.
for sure. Like this is literally the most comprehensive look at 21 that's ever going to be needed. You say it's out of date. I say absolutely not.
It's not out of date.
It's not out of date at all.
The
like,
content is out of date in terms of the covers.
Oh,
because
well, I mean,
as we're speaking now, there's about 5 to 10 more coming in April.
If that's your sticking point,
Yes.
then you go listen to some other thing because you guys got to get this. So
it's afteractionreport.net. You can buy it there. And it's obviously it's unofficial. It's basically all of the information of how it was made, all the creators, or a biography of all the creators. And this was something that, as I was investigating the creators, I was like, holy cow. I mean, we talked about Klaus and Ed Hannigan Denny O'Neil was the editor.
Klaus and Hannigan, didn't they do the Destro chest cover too? My brain's starting to trickle.
I don't think Ed did anything else.
Klaus
Joe.
did though, right?
Klaus did, I think, 26.
Who did the
something.
Destro chest cover? Because I think one of them did.
That's 22. That's the next issue. So
yeah.
It may have been.
Maybe. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
That could be.
That's one of my patented tangential interruptions of the conversation. That
but again,
my wife absolutely.
But
loves.
in 22, in issue number 22, Grunt, talks.
Klaus did that cover. Yeah.
Talks to Snake Eyes, and there's a point about how Scarlet got captured.
Yeah.
In 22, of course, Snake Eyes doesn't answer. Grunt's just talking to himself, basically. But Hammond put that in there. So by 22, he was already starting to build the story.
Yeah. And they've fleshed that out. We touched on it in Action Force. They fleshed it out and did their European version. Right. And when we covered it during the Joe Nye Loves Action Force episodes, it was because they were in arrears reprinting this stuff years later. So they knew as they were heading into the actual regular reprint of it, they knew that their readers would kind of be lost as to what's going on because their version of Snake Eyes was having different adventures and everyone was in a different spot than they would have been in the normal continuity. So they were able to give their version of a lead up story and show her getting kidnapped, and that's really interesting to read.
Yeah, it is.
And then they've done them with wasn't one of the toys? Doesn't this toy insert is this just a straight reprint?
So what?
Because I've seen,
since you're not showing it, you got to talk about it.
Yeah. It's I'm holding the Snake Eyes Storm Shadow 20th anniversary comic pack. Is that just a reprint of the book, or
but it has a new cover and it's just got Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. 25th anniversary format.
And there have been supplemental pieces that lead up to it. And
I think the only other one was in the Devil's Due trade paperback.
That's the one I'm thinking. That is actually
yeah, and that's in here.
Yes, that is the one I'm thinking of. For his origin, was that his origin trade paperback? Yeah. So this is a book. If you're a G.I. Joe fan, this is a great reference book for your shelf. You'd be shocked. You think, how can they do 81 pages?
Yes.
Yeah. How could they do 81? There is plenty to talk about with this. Plenty.
Yeah.
And it's good visual candy. It's a great reference for your shelf. I love reference books. I was just showing Josh around my place, and I have a ton of reference books because in my brain I go, I never know when I'm going to need to reference that. So I need to have all my official handbooks ready to go because I might need to know something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, that's what After Action Report all our books are. We're just reference guides, and the other comic guides are 1 to 3, covers 82 to 2022, all of Hammer, including Devil's Due. We have a character guidebook. We coming at the end of the month, we have a G.I. Joe Transformers checklist book.
That's exciting.
That one's. There's a few articles, but it's mostly just lists and lists and lists of books, so you know what's in there, and that includes all kinds of the IDW continuity, the Transformers continuity from Marvel and IDW and Dreamwave. So we just made a whole book of lists.
I love it.
Which if you want to check them off and track them, you can.
And your partners with it are Roger Taff and Greg Eggebeen, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So quality stuff.
And then there's
by
one
all
other book
measure.
we got to talk about, and that's
Yeah.
Command Files.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
which
Command
you-
Files. Well, listen,
was
I
one of your
gushed on
others.
Command Files about 2-3 episodes ago.
Yes.
So, listeners, go back a couple episodes and listen to me absolutely gush on that. Do you have a timetable for when the next volume is?
Thank you for that question. That's perfect. Lead in. We are going to start that Kickstarter for Command Files Volume 2, which is called Support Elements. The first one was A-Teams, Support Elements, which is all the rest of the G.I. Joes, at the very beginning of May. Maybe around, we're probably going to kick it off just before the SoCal Joe Show, which is on May 4th, so maybe the 3rd or the 2nd. That Kickstarter will go. And, the Greg Eggebeen has been working hard on that book.
Killing it.
And, it
Absolutely
will be
killing it.
done by the time the Kickstarter is done. We can't
That's
completely finish the book until the Kickstarter is over because, things from the Kickstarter will need to go in there in terms of comments and things like that.
Yeah.
So once our Kickstarter is over and then we get the funds, we're sending it to the printer. So his previous...
Oh, you gave me I was surprised to get a shout out. Thank you.
Well, yeah.
No,
Okay.
I genuinely was looking at it going, oh, hey.
Yeah.
I
Well,
appreciate
we were on many podcasts.
Yeah, well,
and there's a lot of good joke supporters. I mean,
Why do this if you can't help elevate other Joe fans and
Yeah.
other Joe products,
Right.
projects and products and all
Right.
that stuff? Because we just want more of it.
Yeah.
Like how there's obviously an appetite for this
Yeah.
stuff. You don't make it. Was it $3 million?
Right.
You don't make that much money on a reprint of a 40-year-old dead series.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't do that
Yeah.
unless there's an absolute appetite for this stuff. So
I recently
Keep it
got the Kickstarter sent out a 2024 summary. And of course, in the comic section, the G.I. Joe Skybound Compendium was like the big highlight of the entire Kickstarter.
it'll be Transformers this year.
2024 year.
Transformers will probably
Right.
do the same.
Yeah. But the love of G.I. Joe comics and the fact that it's still going, I don't know what are we at, 314 or something like that. I don't know what one just came out, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? 314 issues.
That's a lot.
Somebody was saying that like the Savage Dragon is there, of course Spawn are there with the same writer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of comics that have well past 300, but not with the same writer.
Yeah,
And
no, yep.
the somebody
Not
was
with the same writer and survived different such a
Publishers.
rocky publishing history.
Yeah.
It as a fandom, as a clamoring for it has
Right.
absolutely, and again in the same breath as Transformers.
Yeah.
Like they go hand in hand.
And like Claremont with X-Men, he may have done more issues, but it's all X-Men Marvel, so he's in and out, right?
No, he didn't. He hasn't done more than Hama.
He didn't do more than 300.
No.
Oh,
He
'cause
started.
He did it like 12 years.
He
or something.
Yeah, but he started with like. He didn't write 94. I think he started on like issue 96 or something. That was Len Wein doing 94. So Claremont is before 100.
Right.
Pardon me for not knowing that off the top of my head.
Right.
You nerds, don't yell at me. No, but he started. So we'll just say from 100.
Right.
And he wrote through like 300 and something.
So close.
So close, but that's only 200.
Right.
That's not actually close.
And
that's still 100
Yeah, that's
120 more comic books that Hama's written.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
actually not
Right.
terribly close. It is crazy.
And for Transformers, you have Simon Furman, who's probably pretty close, but he's like all over the place.
I'm excited for that compendium's supposed to have all the European stuff. in it,
Yeah.
which is cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So he's got a
Yeah,
lot.
he's-
and
yeah, he's up there,
He
for sure.
also wrote for Action Force too.
Yep.
So Furman
Yep.
did.
We enjoyed his
so,
stuff.
So there's that crossover in terms of artists, in terms of stories, and stuff, and that's a big thing between the two franchises. And
They're just so intertwined.
I'm hoping that someday, whenever they make this movie, like there's been no news about it, and they say it's coming out in 2026. There's no way
it will not be out in 2026.
no.
If they start in 2026, I'll be surprised.
Yeah.
God, I hope they do it. If only
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
someone needs to do it well.
Yeah.
I'll say this: the last Transformers movie, the cartoon was great.
Yes,
So
Transformers 1.
that's awesome. That's
I
a
don't know
different
why they
conversation.
released that in September. It's the dumbest
we've
month.
talked
to
about
release
that, man. The
If that was
marketing,
a summer movie, it would have been a
the
huge
marketing
hit.
on that movie was the worst marketing on any great movie I've ever
Yeah,
seen.
and
that movie
September was
awesome.
dumb. dumb.
They marketed it to the wrong crowd with the wrong jokes, with the wrong vibe, tone. Everything was terrible about that.
Yeah.
That movie was awesome.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that kind of an
Could have been
animated
a Christmas movie.
I'd love to see that kind of an animated treatment for G.I. Joe. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
But like live action wise, I thought that Rise of the Beasts was actually really good.
Yeah,
from a character and just storytelling perspective. The only problem is they keep telling the same story in those Transformers movies.
Right.
The same story.
Right.
A world builder or a world destroyer is coming to destroy Earth.
Right. And
That's
Optimus
it.
Prime wants to defend humans.
Yeah, that's it.
Or
that's
he gets mad at
That's the only story they've told 6 times. I'm done with it. Like I am so done with it. But having said that, the characters in that were actually more fleshed out. The robots were fun. You could tell what they looked like. Bumblebee was great.
Yeah.
I want more of that, and I want less giant explosions.
Right.
And I want more of robots being real people. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
do that. You do
Yeah.
that with a G.I. Joe movie, with the G.I. Joes being real people, and treat them like G.I. Joes. Don't treat every Joe like Snake Eyes.
Right.
Because they all have personalities. They don't
And
all have to wear
just
black.
put them in their regular toy uniforms.
So dumb. So
Don't
dumb.
put them in a whatever. Just give Duke tan shirt strap. Roadblock. And
Unacceptable.
all this.
Unacceptable.
You can either
Whoever's
do him in his
responsible for that-
green jacket or his camo
Whoever was
top.
responsible for that choice went on to become the marketing head for the Transformers 1 movie. That's the problem.
Oh, okay.
They're bad.
So I can tell you, for the first G.I. Joe Rise of the Cobra movie, right?
Yeah.
So now I actually worked on that, and my name is in the credits. So I was
Oh.
on set.
Okay.
Maybe a whole nother
Were you like
podcast.
a,
I was a PA.
Oh, okay.
So, and being on set as a undercover G.I. Joe, Yo
Oh,
Joe
yeah,
expert,
sure.
I didn't tell anybody because I knew that if they knew I was doing Yo Joe, some comic summaries. Again,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is 2008.
Yeah, you'd get in trouble.
The movie wasn't even out yet.
Yeah.
So I got in trouble, so I didn't tell anybody. But at the time. And the director and the people on set wanted to have that movie be international, and the producer, Di Bonaventura Lorenzo, didn't want Cobra Commander in a hood because it's KKK related, or at least he thought it was. You know what I mean? So there was all these kind of elements.
Meanwhile,
in there.
the people who say that, and I'm as liberal as it gets, have obviously never seen what a KKK hood looks like.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
looks nothing like Cobra
Yeah.
Commander's hood.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing like it.
Nothing.
There's
And-
there's no way you would confuse the two.
Yeah, and so there was all these elements, and I remember being on set, and they would talk about the uniforms and things like that because they wanted it to be international. And this is the problem that almost every Hollywood movie has made, except for the Marvel Cinematic movies, is they try to take a Hollywood version of it. So that's what they've done with G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
They've taken Hollywood, whereas
can-
Marvel just makes movies. I mean, they
Right,
put
but you
Thanos
can
with
do-
purple head. They don't change him. He looks
can
like the
do
comics.
G.I. Joe as international heroes and still put them in distinctive costumes. Just
Exactly.
change the flag.
Yeah.
No one's
Right.
going to cry.
Right.
If they're like, oh no, they're wearing the 3rd Battalion of the U.S. Military Corps'
Yeah.
shoulder sleeve pad, but they have I don't even know, French Ghana flag on it. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
Yeah,
'Cause
exactly.
he's going to look like Shipwreck. He's going to look like Shipwreck.
Right.
He's going to look like Beachhead. He's going to look like fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And okay, you give him an accent, and it turns out he's Chinese, or he's from Africa, or
Right.
whatever country you need him to be from.
Right.
You know what? I don't care. Make them look like they're supposed to look. That's the whole joy of G.I. Joe. Is they're all unique. We were just looking at my shelf over there.
Yeah.
The rack of the 36 Joes,
Yeah.
they're all of them on there are unique, and they all look different.
Yes.
If you were to fill that with figures from that first movie, it would be the most drab action figure display you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, and so the whole, I guess the whole aspect of G.I. Joe is that diversity.
Yeah.
and I in our current time of diversity and all these different things that are happening, when you look at that in '82,
G.I. Joe was doing it. G.I. Joe was doing it in '82. They weren't trumpeting it. They just were doing it.
They were just doing it because that's how the military actually was.
Yeah, they were
or
just
is
saying,
still today.
Yeah,
It's
they were
very
looking
diverse.
at it and they were going, "Hey, we should have a
Right.
Native American. We should
Yeah,
have a guy
exactly.
from Hawaii.
And-
we should have a Hispanic guy. We should have a fill in the a woman.
Yeah, and
it's 100% that. They were-
Hammond was like, okay, here's the look. Let me write it up.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because he didn't design the toys.
And they also were being cognizant of this stuff and
Yeah.
saying, you know what, we don't want to make the bad guys
Right.
be people of races that are maybe have their
Yeah.
have their boot on their necks.
Right.
So let's not make
Yeah.
people of color the bad guys because we don't want to associate that with that. We'll just make them generic white dudes.
Right.
And
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
G.I. Joe's always had that vibe.
Yeah.
But
And
they didn't trumpet it, but they were there, and it was there, and it taught a lot of us a lot of lessons
Yeah.
about just treating people right.
Yeah.
And that dude's as good as you, and that dude's as good as you, and there's no reason we can't get along.
Yeah.
Even if your pencil mustache is really weird, zap.
Well, and I mean,
By the way, I'm waiting for a story. I was actually reading your book, or actually Greg's book, the
Command
Files, and I hit the Zap page, and it dawned on me. Someone, because Zap is such a character that's really not going to have a lot, I don't see any Zap the miniseries happening. Someone in one of those books 100% has to have him blow his thumbs off in an accident.
Yeah.
Like, why have we not gotten this yet? He needs to be wounded in a way that
he's an expert, though.
No, I know he's what I'm saying. Or maybe he gets caught. Maybe someone traps him or captures him.
Right.
But the fact that we haven't had the Zap broken thumb in a comic book joke yet,
right.
40 years later, is disappointing to me. He needs to be somehow mangled so that the next time you see him, he's missing his thumb. And they're like, what happened, Zap? And he's like, it's a long story. And you move on. You let Zap, the comic book character, live his own life.
Right.
And we all laugh because he has no thumb. That's it. That's all I got for you. That's all I got for you, Josh. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, man.
I
and
appreciate it.
Again, if anybody out there want to get our books, afteractionreport.net, and we have 6 books and a couple more coming.
Awesome. I love it so much. Yeah, so do that. Check it out. Josh, now you know more about G.I. Joe number 21. You know more about it than you ever wished you could know.
I did learn a lot.
There's still more to learn. Listeners, you have more to learn. And Joeing is half the battle.
That's right. Yo, Joe.